So we need your cooperation. So are we ready to cooperate? Yes? We've made sure we come down to this hall is because we want maximum people to see him. And there the applause is already on. For people who haven't seen, they're still confused what's happening. It is Ruskin Bond with us here today. Here, ladies and gentlemen, the first sight that you catch of the real Bond. Ruskin Bond with us.
Thank you all. It's great to see you all here, especially out in the open. I hadn't expected such a large crowd and so many of you. So I hope Arjun is going to interview me and we'll do our best to keep you awake.
Well, check. Even before this session can start, let me first of all introduce the session. Sir, could you kindly take your seat, please? And Arjun as well. Check. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and I'm sure this is one of the best afternoons that we have. I mean, when in the morning do we get up to realize that this afternoon we're actually going to see that one person who's written over. Let me keep that as a secret. Let's introduce the first thing is the session. This session is about the real Bond, and who doubts that? He is the real Bond with us, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Yes or no? Alright, so this session is all about the real Bond.
Too, I think. Huh?
Ruskin Bond, India's most charming writer, descends from the hills of Missouri and works his magic while being interviewed by a 15-year-old guy, Arjun Mirani. I so envy this guy today. I wish I was in Arjun Mirani. A big round of applause for Arjun Mirani. Thank you. I am sure this 15-year-old guy must have done something great that I'm about to tell you now, that a guy down there, 15 years old, has possibly made his way up to reach the best writer, and he's going one-on-one in conversation with him, which is a big thing for him. Yet again, a big round of applause for Arjun Mirani. Thank you. And even before we start an introduction to Arjun Mirani, books, guitars, and physics. That's a little weird about literature. Physics, okay. These words best describe young Arjun Mirani, a 15-year-old student of the Cathedral and John Convent School. Arjun likes nothing more than immersing himself in the books, surrounded by the sound of music. When he is not playing the guitar with his band, he is most likely to be found trying to find out why E is equal to MC square. And wow, that's some real engagement. Did you find out by any chance? You found out?
Yes, I read a book on it.
You read a book on it? Wow, I just thought it was a simple equation. Okay. This is all about Arjun Mirani, and now coming down to the real Bond that we say, ladies and gentlemen. If you think this moment is not real, just try pinching yourself. It is the real moment. We have Ruskin Bond with us, and to give an introduction, which I don't think I really need to do that, I don't even hold the dignity to do it, but let me take this honor to introduce India's best, biggest, magnificent, phenomenal, and I don't know how many words can fit in this bracket, Ruskin Bond, born in Kasauli, Himachal Pradesh in 1934. Ruskin Bond grew up in Jamnagar, Dehradun, New Delhi and Simla. His first novel, now this is going to be that one introduction I'm going to take a lot of pauses in, because there are certain facts you don't just believe while reading. So the first fact which comes up is, his first novel, The Room on the Roof, written when he was 17. That's it. How good is that? 17 years and the first novel comes up. This is what is called pure magnificence. Yet there there are many other facts to come up. That received an award, a memorial prize in 1957. Since then, he has written over 500 short stories, essays and novels, and more than 40 books for children. And that's the reason we have so many of them down here. Children, give it up for Ruskin Bond, loud enough! He's received the Sahitya Akademi Award for English Writing in India in 1993, the Padma Shri in 1999, and the Delhi government's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012, and not to forget the one award due, which comes tomorrow evening to add one more star to his name, is the Lifetime Award given by the Times of India. The Times Literary Carnival is honoring the one and only Ruskin Bond with yet another Lifetime Achievement Award, which happens to be in the same place tomorrow evening. So if today you're here, do not even think of missing it on tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to hold you back for any more second now. It's an hour of Arjun Mirani and Ruskin Bond one-on-one conversation. Give it up for this session. Thank you so much, and Arjun, it's over to you now for an hour. The mic and Mr. Bond is absolutely yours.
Mr. Bond, you make me as your reader believe that every single character you write about you've actually met, and every single experience that you describe has actually happened to you. And we all have seemingly innocuous interactions with people, yet you seem to look very deeply into this and you draw out the potential. So how much of your writing is reality? And when you meet people, do you think in your mind that, okay, there's a story here? Or do you reflect on these interactions later and then write about them?
Of course, people do make stories. And but when I meet someone, I'm not perhaps insensitive as to think you're a story, or I'm going to write a story about you. Perhaps later or years later even, I might reflect upon a meeting or an incident or someone I've known, and so I think, as with all writers, their characters are very often based on real people or people they've known, and they might well, change things around. And it's true that a lot of my writing is autobiographical, and but I do mix it up. I fictionalize, because sometimes to tell a story, if you just stick to the everyday mundane events of your life, it can be pretty boring. So I take sometimes real people and put them in situations which are interesting or entertaining and hopefully meaningful.
And your writings have proved endearing to not just one or two, but 3 generations. So my father studied The Room on the Roof at school, and I'm studying The Tiger in the Tunnel for my ICSE. And some of my mother's friends are your biggest fans, and some of my friends love your work too. So your books never seem to be old-fashioned. How do you explain this enduring appeal?
I'm very lucky in that I've been through 3 generations of readers. As you say, your father studied one of my books when he was at school, and then when I spoke to him, I realized that I'd written my first story before your dad was born. So it's certainly, I think, the greatest reward of my life in a way is that I am still finding readers today, in fact more readers today than I've ever had in my life, and readers of all ages. It's so nice to be having young readers and older readers too. And I think one reason why perhaps my stories haven't dated is that I'm writing about normal human beings and their joys and their sorrows, and so there's no difference really, basically, in people. As the world keeps changing around us, but basically at heart, we're all the same. We don't change very much.
Now I'm going to ask you to read a passage from your book, Friends in Small Places. It's about your father.
I'd better put on my reading glasses. now I don't see you at all. I'm glad Arjun is here. Otherwise, I'd be dropping things all over the place. It was about 2 weeks after receiving this letter that I was given the news of my father's death. Those frequent bouts of malaria had undermined his health, and a severe attack of jaundice did the rest. A kind but inept teacher was given the unenviable task of breaking the news to me. He mumbled something about God needing my father more than I did. And of course, I knew what had happened and broke down and had to be taken to the infirmary, where I remained for a couple of days. It never made any sense to me why God should have needed my father more than I did. Unless, of course, God envied my father's stamp collection. If God was love, why did he have to break up the only loving relationship I'd known so far? What would happen to me now, I wondered? Would I live with Calcutta Granny or some other relative, or be put away in an orphanage? The headmaster, Mr. Priestley, saw me in his office and said I'd be going to my mother when school closed. He said he'd been told that I had kept my father's letters, and that, if I wished to put them in his safekeeping, he'd see that they were not lost. I handed them over, all except the one I've reproduced here in this book. The day before we broke up for the school holidays, I went to Mr. Priestley and asked for my letters. What letters? He looked bemused, irritated. He'd had a trying day. My father's letters, I told him. You said you'd keep them for me, sir. Did I? Don't remember. Why should I want to keep your father's letters? I don't know, sir. You put them in your drawer. He opened the drawer, shut it. None of your letters here. I'm very busy now, Bond. If I find any of your letters, I'll give them to you. I was dismissed from his presence. So I never saw those letters again, and I'm glad to say I did not see Mr. Priestley again. So not all headmasters are kind and sensitive. I know why Arjun chose that paragraph for me to read. Because so many of you are school children here, and I'm sure you have more sensitive and kind headmasters and principals than I did 65 years ago. Now I can see you better. Now I see you better, thank you.
Your father passed away when you were only 10, yet you remember him so vividly in your writings, and you also credit him with your love for reading and writing. So can you tell us more about how he inspired you?
Well, he certainly got me to read and write even before I started going to school. In those days, we didn't start going to school till we was 6 or 7 years old. And now I find children that when they're 3 or 4, they're having bundled off to school. So I had actually already, I was reading and writing before I started school, and it was my father would put books my way. I can't say that he inspired me or turned me into a writer, because I was only 9 years old when he passed on. So I think, but it was that the germ that was laid there, in the sense that I come to books and reading at an early age, and it was books and it was writing, other writers, that really set me off, and as a boy, and made me a bookworm. And I know Arjun here is also a bookworm, and he's built up a small library, and he hates anybody interfering with it or or taking out books and putting them back in the wrong place. And book lovers are very fussy about their books.
I'll ask you to read a few verses from your poem, A Song for Lost Friends. And this was a passage I really enjoyed, and I found the ending a bit astonishing. So.
Okay. But I wrote this poem about, must be in around 1970. It's hard, I find it hard sometimes to actually date my stories and poems, but because I've never really made a record in that sense. But so I always have just a rough idea. Near the railway lines, watching the trains, there were 6 every day coming or going, and across the line, the leper colony. I did not know they were lepers till later, but I knew they were different. Some were without fingers or toes, and one had no nose, and a few had holes in their faces. And yet, some were beautiful. They had their children with them, and the children were no different from other children. I made friends with some, and won most of their marbles, and carried them home in my pockets. I was good at marbles. One day my parents found me playing near the leper colony. There was a big scene. My mother shouted at the lepers, and they hung their heads as though it was all their fault. And the children had nothing to say. I was taken home in disgrace, and told all about leprosy, and given a bath. My clothes were thrown away, and the servants wouldn't touch me for days. So, I took the marbles I'd won and put them in my stepfather's cupboard, hoping he'd catch leprosy from them.
So that displayed a really wicked sense of humor. And even in your stories, A Job Well Done, and he said it with arsenic, you write about things like death, deceit and murder with such casual ease. And I found this quite shocking because most of your writing is very sensitive. So where did these stories come from? Are you just having fun with your readers?
No, I have fun with myself sometimes. Yeah, no, true. I sometimes I feel a bit naughty, and the humor is perhaps a little malicious, but I'm not a nasty person, I can assure you.
So we live in Mumbai, which is, as you can see, a very crowded metropolis, while you live in Mussoorie, which is right in the cradle of the Himalayas. And you seem to have a very profound relationship with nature, especially with the mountains. So can you tell us more about this?
I guess I was always close to nature, and that I had spent many years in the hills as a schoolboy, and then after about 4 years, of living in cities for a number of years. In London for 3 or 4 after leaving India, coming back, in Delhi for 4 or 5 years, and then I just wanted to escape in a way, and I thought if I went up and lived in the mountainside, I'd perhaps write better. I'm not sure that I wrote any better, because if you're a writer and you're worth anything, you should be able to write anywhere, in a railway compartment or on a roadside bench, or just wherever you happen to be. But certainly from the point of being happy, personally, the move was a wise one, because I think if you're living in a place where you are happy, contented, where you find people who relate to you, and then it certainly helps you in your work. And I think after that move to the hills, my output certainly improved. I was writing more, and I still do. So I've never regretted that move. And you can be close to nature here. There's all these wonderful trees around you. So I think if you, wherever you're living, you can grow something, find a green spot. Look, only yesterday evening I was taken to the Hanging Gardens here in Mumbai, and and there were all these old gentlemen sitting on benches or walking very fast round and round these gardens, and I thought, well, if I happen to be living here in Mumbai, this is what I'll be doing in the evenings, working off a few inches around my waist. So I think you can find nature anywhere you want to.
A lot of popular writing today, especially for children and young adults, is from the fantasy genre. So books like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. And they take you on a sort of roller coaster ride where anything can happen, while your stories keep us firmly on the ground. So I'd love to hear your views on the fantasy genre. Do you like it, and would you write such stories?
Well, fantasy has always been there. The first book I read was Alice in Wonderland, which is pure fantasy. Then Peter Pan. Peter Pan was the forerunner of Harry Potter, the boy who never grew up, who can fly, who can do wonderful things. So it's nothing new, and it has an appeal to younger people because it's a great escape from the mundane everyday life that you often have to lead, school days, monotonous work. So it stimulates your imagination. And but I'm not very good at fantasy myself. I prefer to write about real people and their lives and myself and people around me. So I think you have to have a special kind of gift maybe for writing fantasy. Well, maybe I'll try it someday.
One thing I noticed while reading your stories was that whenever you describe characters, you mention their eyes a lot. So, for example, in The Night Train to Deoli, you describe the girl's eyes as dark, troubled, smouldering, and I quote here from Time Stops at Shamli. I looked at the girl's fair round face, and in her bright eyes, I saw something old and wise. And I looked into the old man's wise eyes, and saw something forever bright and young. The skin cannot change the eyes. The eyes are the true reflections of a man's age and sensibilities. Even a blind man has hidden eyes. So you seem to truly believe that eyes are like a window to the soul. Do you judge people by their eyes?
Well, when you're 16 or 17, you're always gazing into the eyes of a beautiful girl, if there happens to be one around you. And but I would revise what I've said there. I think it's not the eyes so much. It's the expression of the face that tells you something of the person. And as I've got older, I think you look at it, eyes, our eyes are practically all the same except for the color. It's just the smile on your face or the expression on your face or your reaction to something that's said that gives character and lights up the eyes. So it's... So I think that observation that I made there was made about 30, 40 years ago. And since then I would say it's not the eyes, it's the smile.
Now I'll ask you to read from your book, Friends in Small Places. This is a passage from a time when you were very despondent.
Okay, I might as well stick with these Woody Allen glasses that I've got on. This is about a girl in the mountains. And so I brooded, walked disconsolately through the oak forest, hardly listening to the birds, the sweet-throated whistling thrush, the shrill barbet, the mellow-voiced doves. Happiness had always made me more responsive to nature. Feeling miserable, my thoughts turned inward. I brooded upon the trickery of time and circumstance. I felt the years were passing by, had passed by, like waves on a receding tide, leaving me washed up like a bit of flotsam on a lonely beach. But at the same time, the whistling thrush seemed to mock at me, calling tantalizingly me from the shadows of the ravine. It isn't time that's passing by. It is you and I. It is you and I. I must say, Arjun has chosen some very interesting passages for me to read out.
Can you tell us more about what makes you feel melancholy like this and how it impacts your writing? And also, which of your stories have emanated from dark periods in your life?
when I was younger, I was more of a melancholy fellow, brooding over various things. As I grow older, I think I've become more philosophical and easygoing, and I see the funny side of life more often. So I think some of my recent writing has not been melancholy at all. It's been humorous and on the lighter side. So as we grow older, we don't necessarily become more serious. Certainly I haven't. And the more I see of young people, the more I find that life is full of life.
Now I'll quote from your book, Friends in Small Places. That it was possible to make money out of one's hobby was something I was to remember when writing became my passion. So your father made some money by selling stamps from his stamp collection, but you made writing your whole life, your profession. And since the time you wrote The Room on the Roof at age 17 to now Crazy Times with Uncle Ken at 77, there have been more than 500 works in between, including short stories, poems, novellas. So where does this constant inspiration come from? I mean, you never seem to run out of tales and characters, and you have this infinite repository of things to write about. So don't you ever suffer from writer's block?
Occasionally one gets writer's block, and the solution to that is to keep a waste paper basket close to you and do away with whatever you feel hasn't worked out. But yes, I've not really run out of inspiration, you could say, because if you're interested in people, then you won't, because people are what give you stories, give you something to write about. Also, as you get older, you're in a way, a writer is very fortunate because you have so much more to look back upon. You have your whole life to look back upon. People you've known, things that have happened to you, good memories, bad memories. There's just no shortage of you don't run out of stories or of material. Whereas when you're 17 or 18, which is when I started out writing, all I had to write about was myself, which I did fairly well. But then there was a hiatus, there was a period, I think, after my first novel, when I was really struggling to find something to write about, something to say. And that's when I've switched for a time to writing for children, because I thought I could, it would make a change for me. I would be writing for a different audience, and I would have to tell a story and hold their attention, because when you write for children, you'd better catch their attention on page 1 or 2, otherwise they're not going to continue with your book or story. They'll put it in the waste paper basket. So that in itself was a discipline. And I've switched around, I think, sometimes from fiction to poetry to essays to non-fiction and autobiography. So if one particular genre has made me a little tedious or bored with it, I can switch to another.
There must have been periods in your life when the going was rough and when your funds were running low. So at these times, how did you keep yourself motivated as a writer? And did you ever think of giving it up?
Funds were always running low. But I stuck with it. You see, back in the 1950s when I started out, again in the 60s, in the 70s, we did not have many book publishers in India. Very few. And those that were there were into textbook publishing or doing school books. You didn't get publishers bringing out novels or fiction. So you had to look for a publisher abroad very often, as many Indian writers did then. Writers like Namal Krajanand and Kamla Markandeya and others, they had to be published abroad. So, but there were magazines in India. And we had a great magazine called the Illustrated Weekly of India, which was published by the Times of India group. And it had a great editor back in the 50s called C.R. Mandy. And he encouraged me and used to publish all my early stories. In fact, it was those early stories that are still today extant in readers and in school and college books. And then the weekly, even the Times of India, the newspaper used to publish fiction. Newspapers in those days would publish fiction. Magazines did. There was a magazine called Sport and Pastime, which published, apart from sport, it would publish short stories. So so if I worked hard and wrote, say, 5 or 6 short stories a month, I'd make 1,000 rupees a month. This was back in 1956, 57. There was even an army magazine called Sainik Samachar, which would publish my stories, and they'd send me money orders for 25 rupees. 25 rupees wasn't bad. There was a little magazine down south called My Magazine of India, which would pay me 5 rupees for a story. So I would send them all my rejects. What couldn't get in it. One month they forgot to send me my 5 rupee money order. So I wrote them a strong letter and I said, why aren't you paying me anymore? They wrote back and said, dear Mr. Bond, we are still want your stories, but we only sent you 2 rupees this time because we cut 3 rupees for the subscription to the magazine. So even magazines had a hard time surviving. But that's all right. Back in the 50s, you could manage quite well on a few hundred rupees. Very different from today. But then gradually in the 1980s, things got better for publishing in India. If publishers are doing well, writers will do well. So that's, in that way we've been fortunate. So now you get so many young writers, successful ones, their books selling in hundreds of thousands, and even some of mine are selling, which is good news.
Did you really run away from home with a boy called Manohar? And were you glad to be found and brought back?
I ran away from home for a day or two, but I didn't take enough pocket money with me. So I came back with my tail between my legs on day 2 and came home and said, Mum, what's for lunch? Because I was very hungry by then.
How old were you?
Oh, I don't know, about 12, I think.
I'm sure there are many people in the audience, and including me, who want to be successful authors like you. So what advice would you give us?
Run away from home. That's when I finished school. And which was in those days senior Cambridge or class 10 or 11, and came home, and my mother said, "Now, Ruskin, what are you going to do with yourself?" And I said, "I think I want to be a writer, Mum." She said, "Don't be silly. Go and join the army." In which case you'd have another Beetle Bailey in the army now, I think. But of course I didn't. The army was lucky and very lucky not to have me. And I went off to England instead and worked there. I worked with a travel agency. I worked with a photographic firm. I worked with the public health department and various other things, and wrote my first book at night whenever I used to come home. And it took me a couple of years to find a publisher. It wasn't easy. And I did it about 3 drafts. I rewrote it again and again till it was acceptable. And that was my first novel, The Room on the Roof, which Arjun has just mentioned. That was, my goodness, that was early 1950s, over 60 years back. And that book is still around, so that's it's nice. I feel it was worth it after all. Thank you.
Now I'll ask you to read from your story about Uncle Ken, which is very humorous.
Yeah, Uncle Ken was. When I run out of characters, I sometimes fall back on relatives, provided they're living far away and can't get to me. And sometimes I resort to ghost stories too. Although I have to confess, I don't know any ghosts intimately. In fact, when I was coming here, invited to this festival, and I asked somebody, what's this award all about? What are they going to give me? And I was told, a rocking chair. And I've got 2 rocking chairs at home already, and one is haunted. At about midnight, it starts rocking by itself. This is about my Uncle Ken, who never kept a job for long, and he got through life because he had 5 sisters, all of whom were married to comparatively well-off gentlemen, and so he would divide his time between them, moving from one place to another. But he was an interesting character. The Maharani of Jetpur needs a tutor for her children, she said. Just a boy and a girl. How do you know? Asked Granny. I heard it from their ayah. The pay is 200 rupees a month and there is not much work. Only 2 hours every morning. That should suit Uncle Ken, I said. Yes, it's a good idea, said Granny. We'll have to talk him into applying. He ought to go over and see them. The Maharani is a good person to work for. Uncle Ken agreed to go over and inquire about the job. The Maharani was out when he called, but he was interviewed by the Maharaja. Do you play tennis? Asked the Maharaja. Yes, said Uncle Ken, who remembered having played a bit of tennis when he was a schoolboy. In that case, the job's yours. I've been looking for a 4th player for a doubles match. By the way, were you at Cambridge? No, I was at Oxford, said Uncle Ken. The Maharaja was impressed. An Oxford man who could play tennis was just the sort of tutor he wanted for his children. I ought to add that Uncle Ken had been to Oxford, but not to the university. He worked in a pub over there for 2 years. But all you had to say in those days, I was at Oxford or I was at Cambridge, and people took you on straight away. When Uncle Ken told Granny about the interview, she said, But you haven't been to Oxford, Ken. How could you say that? Of course I've been to Oxford. Don't you remember? I spent 2 years there with your brother Jim. Yes, but you were helping him in his pub in the town. You weren't at the university. Well, the Maharaja never asked me if I'd been to the university. He asked me if I'd been to Cambridge, and I said, no, I was at Oxford, which was perfectly true. He didn't ask me what I was doing there. So, and he strolled off whistling. To our surprise, he was a great success in his job. In the beginning anyway. The Maharaja was such a poor tennis player that he was delighted to discover that there was someone who was even worse. So, instead of becoming a doubles partner for the Maharaja, Uncle Ken became his favorite singles opponent. As long as he kept losing to His Highness, his job was safe. It's over.
I'll ask you to read your poem, If Mice Could Roar. It's a short one for children.
If mice could roar, and elephants soar, and trees grow up in the sky, if tigers could dine on biscuits and wine, and the fattest of men could fly, if pebbles could sing, and bells never ring, and teachers got lost in the post, if a tortoise could run, and losses be won, and bullies be buttered on toast, if a song brought a shower, and a gun grew a flower, this world would be nicer than most.
And you write ghost stories.
You forgot my specs, Arjun. Carry on.
You write quite a few ghost stories. So, to what extent do you really believe in the paranormal?
Actually, I don't believe in it at all. But I used to enjoy reading ghost stories when I was a boy, and I find young people still do, old people too. So, and I like creating an atmosphere, a sort of because what are ghosts after all? But I think projections from our own subconscious. So it's an interesting field, and sometimes I just get carried away and scare myself. So I write the odd ghost story, and there were some great story writers like M.R. James and Algernon Blackwood and Edgar Allan Poe and others who wrote terrific ghost stories. So it's a medium that I also enjoyed working in.
I have a quick rapid fire round for you. So who is your favorite author?
Rapid fire round, and you asked me the most difficult question. I don't have a favorite author. Well, let's say, in a way, when I was at school, Dickens set me off. David Copperfield, yes.
And a book that you think every young adult should read, apart from The Room on the Roof?
Every young adult should read, I don't know, elementary mathematics or something, I think.
Who's your favorite literary character?
My favorite literary character? I like Bertie Wooster. Thank you,
Your favorite story from your own writing?
Oh, again, I don't have a favorite story, but maybe that one you mentioned, The Night Train at Deoli. It goes back to my romantic 20s.
Is that story really true?
It's a little bit true, partly wishful thinking.
Your favorite movie?
My favorite movie was probably Goodbye Mr. Chips, which was long, long ago.
And your favorite food?
Favorite food? Oh, that's very easy. I just like a hot buttered toast with a sardine on it.
So we've reached the end. Thank you, Mr. Bond. It's been a huge honor to speak to you.
Thank you, Arjun. I have to say I'm very lucky in having such a good interviewer and an intelligent and well-read boy to talk to me. Now we sing and dance. Okay, right. I think I take some questions from the audience. You stay here. You stay here.
Check. Alright, guys and girls, guys here. All your young girls, get seated. Nobody moves because the most special part is just about to come. So, what have we learned from this entire session is, number one, we don't go back home. We stay outside to become a good author. Number two, what is that we learned? Anyone? Read Charles Dickens? Yes. And? And? Eat butter toast. So you have found all the secrets to be a Ruskin Bond and a pure real Bond. Now, I am sure, being a pure human, we want more, and we want more, and we want more. Isn't it? Now tell me that there are people who want to get their books autographed, who want to have pictures with him, and I would say a clear no. How sweet of me. So, let the surprise be here. We have Bachi ma'am right in front of us, and she is here with a... By the way, just give a big round of applause for her, because this lady doesn't seem... She's pretty humble about the fact we should all realize she's too big a lady between us. So give a big round of applause once again for Bachi ma'am. And she's going to reveal a big secret only provided. Our very special Sir Ruskin Bond is about to leave. If you move from your seat, a single person moves an inch. Spread your eyes to the last of horizon wherever you can, but do not move from the place. Because the secret dies for everyone if even one person moves. And trust me, I cannot play with so many people here. I have to go back home. So there is a secret, a surprise that waits for all of you. Promise me you're not moving. Are you moving? Loud enough. Are you moving? Do not move an inch. And yes, you can give a big round of applause for Ruskin Bond and Arjun Mirani, the small little guy that I don't think I can call. And he's about to leave this place. Nobody even gets up. Let Bachi ma'am reveal the surprise after that. Nobody gets up. Yeah, you can look around where is he going, but I'm sure the surprise is much better than what you're expecting. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
And thank you for your very lively...
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, just to inform you, this session was just about something called fabulous. Yes? Now tomorrow evening, there's something which is more than fabulous. The person up on stage is about to get a Lifetime Achievement Award. Not everyone in here can really afford to get that, but he, at the Times Literary Carnival 2013, he is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award tomorrow evening. So if the numbers are around a 60 crore today in here, let it be a 120 crores tomorrow. So are we all in for that? Yes? Now we do not move for the surprise to come. Thank you.
Okay, but Ruskin, you can move. I said you can move, Ruskin. See, he's scared. Ruskin
Kids, you don't move. Kids, you don't move. Bachi ma'am is up there for a surprise. And for the elderly people as well. You know, when we tell you the surprise, you're going to be like, we love Times of India. It's only the Times of India which can give us this. Yes, our Ruskin Bond is leaving. Give a big round of applause for him. And let it not just be there for the claps. Make some noise for him. Let him get these noises down there in the hills of Missouri when he's back. Then yes, Mumbai was something big. Now let me make sure he's left. He's still around. Yeah, I'm not going to reveal it till the time. No, you're not going back home. I said I have to go back home. I cannot cheat on 1,000 people. Probably I'll find my bike punctured, my helmet broken. So I need that proper, right? So Bachi ma'am, it's up to you how you reveal it.
Alright, here's the secret. Instead of Ruskin Bond, I'm going to sign the autographs. No! Let me count on. No!